Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite up onto the stage our panelists. We have Dr. Genevieve Connors, who's Program Leader of Water and Sustainability in the India Country Office of the World Bank, who's arriving with impeccable timing. Genevieve, do come onto the stage. Mr. Slavomir Mazurek, Deputy Minister of Environment and the Institute for Social and Economic Change, and the former Chief Secretary of Karnataka. Ms. Astrid Schulmaker, who's Director of Global Sustainable Development at the DG Environment for the European Commission, the Environment Director of the European Commission. Dr. Alok Sikka from the International Water Management Institute, the country representative for India. And finally, our chair today is Dr. S.K. Saka, a distinguished fellow at TERI. Please welcome all your panelists.
Good morning, everybody, and I welcome all the panel members and all of you for this important session. This session will be discussing achieving sustainable development goals, challenges and opportunities. Why is it very important today? If you recall that the world has seen the global financial crisis, but the world has not seen the global water crisis. It is not because that there is a limited availability of water. It is because the root cause of the crisis lies in institutions and the political choices. Like hunger, deprivation in the access of water is a silent crisis being experienced by the poor people and tolerated by those who can afford it with their money, resources, technology. So our world, which we inherited and which we should keep in a better position for the next generation, is facing a big problem on the water side. To give you a little idea on this subject, only 0.4% of the global water resources, freshwater resources, are available for consumption. And who are consuming? The consumption, 70% of the water worldwide goes to the agricultural sector, approximately 22% goes to the industrial sector, and around 8 to 9% goes to the domestic sector. Our consumption is such that it is growing day by day. By 2030, an estimate shows that our demand will be 40% more than the available supply of fresh water in the world. Not only that, our groundwater footprint is 3.5 times the available size of the aquifer. So we are in a situation where we are going to a position where many countries will see the water stress condition and even water scarcity condition if you look from the angle of the per capita availability of water. So the same reflection we can see in India. As you see in the world that 14% of the population, they enjoy around 53% of the available water. And the 86% of the population, they enjoy the rest. That includes the Indian, China, and many other countries. So this uneven distribution is creating a big problem for many of us. Now, given this situation, the world community has given us a goal, sustainable development goals, and there are many components. Goal number 6 and also goal 12 also talks about sustainable consumption. Now, there are many subcomponents of the goals. Of goal 6, water quality, water efficiency, integrated water resource management, access to water, and so many other items. Now the issue is that how to achieve those goals. What are the challenges? Is it the challenges on the policy front? Is it the challenges on the institutional front? Is it the challenges technology front, financial front? So these are the issues every country is facing, including India. So this panel will be discussing some of these issues, and will also address the point how one can overcome and what kind of opportunities this crisis will bring before us. So this is an important session. So I first would request Dr. Connors, who is the program leader of the India country the office of the World Bank, and she has an extensive experience in the water sector. At some point in time, she worked with the Ganga river project and also the other areas. So may I request Dr. Connors?
Thank you, Chair. Is this working? Yeah, okay, great. All right, good morning, everybody. We stand between you and lunch, so we will try and be interesting. I just wanted to make a few points. I don't have a presentation. I'd like to say a few points just to set the context of what the SDG 6 is on water. The chair already touched on the first point that I want to make, which is that there are many more targets for this SDG on water than there were for the equivalent MDG. So there are actually 6 targets which relate to outcomes with regards to improved water and/or sanitation. And there are 2 targets with regards to the processes that need to be followed in order to achieve those outcomes. And they have to do with capacity building and international cooperation. With regards to the 6, as was already mentioned, they really span a much, much bigger range than the previous MDG. They focus on ecosystems, on water quality, they focus on water use efficiency, and maybe in the discussion this will be an interesting thing to examine because these help us get at the issue of water from its multiple dimensions. If 70% of the water, as was just mentioned, or 90% of the water that's utilized in the Ganga Basin, for example, goes to agriculture, and you really want to affect some kind of sea change in how water is managed, the entry point is probably not water supply and sanitation, as was the case with the MDG. So that's my first point, is that although often people associate the MDG with just water supply and sanitation services, the SDG on water is much, much, much bigger. And we can get into some of the various dimensions, but that's my first point. My second point is on measurement. How are these going to be measured? The SDGs are well known for being much more ambitious than the MDGs. There are 17 goals, we all know that. There are 169 targets, and there are 230 global indicators, which in itself is a huge number to be measured. Complicated by the fact that the targets are actually aspirational. This is very important. Each country, each sovereign nation has the obligation in essence, but also the privilege to customize what it wants to achieve. And therefore, we will be measuring, in some sense, apples and oranges over time. There is an interagency expert group that's been established. It has 28 member states to try and set what the metrics will be for the SDGs. And of course, for SDG 6, the umbrella organization looking after all of these is UN Water. But again, that also is divided between the processes, the water and sanitation outcomes, and then the other, maybe water resources management type outcomes that have to do with basin management, transboundary cooperation, water efficiency, and so on. So the point there is that the indicators will be customized over time, and that process is ongoing as we speak with a very large set of agencies looking at this issue. The third point I want to make is that coming back to how the this SDG is different from the related MDG. Now, the related MDG on water and sanitation, as I said earlier, really was about access to safe drinking water and to basic sanitation. But a related point is that was really about access, and many of the MDGs were. They were on getting halfway there. They were about halving the proportion of people who have access to X, Y, or Z. The SDGs are much more ambitious, much more broad-based, as I said, not only with regards to the subject matter within the topic of water, but also on getting to zero. So the targets, although they will be set by country, and they may not necessarily be to eliminate a problem, but in that 15-year window, we are trying to achieve much, much more on many more things. For example, one of the indicators will be the fresh water withdrawal as a proportion of available freshwater resources. So obviously the goal is 100. Right now we might be at 120%, 110%, 150% in some cases. So the goal will be much more ambitious. We're trying to eliminate a problem. And I think that will therefore make this very difficult to achieve, and the customization as by countries will be absolutely critical to, at the end of 2030, being able to look back and say, how did we do? Two more quick points, Chair, then I'll stop. The fourth one is that we talk a lot about what are the key challenges to achieving this SDG. There are many. In fact, there are many critics of the SDGs that say they're impossible to measure, there are too many of them. I think just to focus on two, which we can come back to in the discussion. One is that in order to achieve this kind of ambition, to actually realize it, we will need to go on a war path. We will need to go on a war footing, the way we have done with eliminating polio, with introducing special vaccines. It's very hard to do that when you're covering many 230 global indicators. So I think achieving the momentum of resources and of people and of targeted financing when actually we have so many targets is going to be very difficult. Related is the financing story. What are some of these financing strategies? How will we mobilize the kind of money that's required? In India's INDC, now NDC, preliminary estimates are that India alone would need in excess of $200 billion to achieve its adaptation actions. Now, many of these are overlapped with the SDGs. Now, that includes many different sectors, but we're talking about billions of dollars for one country, trillions of dollars globally. There's certainly no absorptive capacity or financing available in the world of multilateral development banks or bilateral aid agencies or any kind of concessional finance. And even countries that have their own budgets will have to do a major reallocation of resources from one set of priorities to another. So I think we'll have to look very carefully at mobilizing financing across the business sector, the private sector. We have a huge CSR pool in this country to work with, NGOs, and also households. Household level expenditure will be key to achieving these goals. And then very lastly, I don't know if that zero is flashing at me. Very lastly, one of the questions going into this that I think we'll get to is what are the trade-offs between India's NDC and this SDG 6 for India? And my point that I'd like to put forward is that I don't think there are actually very many trade-offs between them. I think there's huge complementarities, synergies, and overlaps between them. But I do think there will be trade-offs to achieving the water objectives of the SDG. And that relates to how you prioritize, where you would like to put your limited resources, whether that's financial or human. And I don't think we will be able to achieve all the SDGs in the targets for SDG 6 at the same time. There will not be uniform progress. We will have to prioritize. And I think the discussion on measurement over the coming year, both at the level of the expert advisory group, but also within India, as led by the various government ministries and agencies, will have to focus on what do we want to achieve first. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Connors. You have brought out very clearly the holistic approach which is being adopted under SDG vis-a-vis Millennium Development Goal. And this is the first time that the water is taken in a holistic manner, in an overall perspective, rather than looking only at the access of water or the sanitation. Second thing, I think you have brought out very clearly on the challenges, particularly the finances. We have seen that in many countries, including India, even to adopt a water saving technique, maximizing water use, minimizing water use technique, it is investment, much investment is required. Especially, let's talk about the agricultural sector where much of the water is being consumed. And also you brought out the kind of focus, the kind of political commitment is required to achieve all the sub goals of the SDG. Thank you very much. May I now call upon His Excellency Mazurek, Deputy Minister of Environment, Poland. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for TERI for organizing this panel, very important for all the world. I think the water challenge is still a challenge. We have good mobile phones, we have good transport or something, but many people on the world don't have good water to drink. It's a big shame for our civilization. But also we don't stay in this situation. The sustainable goals, it's a good occasion to change the world for the better. In my Poland experience, It's in my country, we have big progress, big transition from the communist time for time of freedom. Last 25 years, it was great time in the water management and water resources in Poland. And normally when you live in the city, you don't think we have problem with water. What problem with water? We have water. Good water, you can drink this water. But if you don't have too much rain, last month we had a situation, the people from our farmers said, we have problem. We don't have water, enough water for our agriculture. And it's still the challenge to have better situation in this area. Now we have big reform in Poland. Is the water reform, big water law. My colleague who is responsible about water, now discuss on Polish government about how important is this law. It's very big discussion because we have many stakeholders. It's not only community, it's also the international corporation who want to have cheap water. But if you want to have better situation with flooding, with water for cities, for village, for everyone, we need to have a little bit bigger price about water. It's only €0.5 in the year for the Polish family, but for the business, it's high price. But with our discussion, we still discuss, but I hope in this year we finish and we start a new program, and we have start new policy about management of water in Poland. And it is very important for us because also it's the element of the implementation of EU law and water framework direction. But we have big progress. This 25 years is big progress of quality of water for people. Thanks for policy, Polish environmental policy and Polish School of Ecology. We can measure quality of water, not only the risk of flooding, but also the quality of water. We have very good sanitation water, and we drink good water in the city and village. But it's our Polish local situation. But in the world, we know water resources and shared among sectors, communities are as well across geographical and political borders. Water must be given within and among countries a high political priority. We know that. It's very important for us also to push forward our ideas and everything what does it mean the water in the sustainable goals. Poland shares the view that to overcome water-related long-term problems, we should commit the prioritized water challenge. Countries and international community as whole should work together and undertake a conditioned effort. The key for better future is cooperation and sharing experience. I hope we are ready to sharing, we are ready to cooperate, and my country and I think the whole Europe is ready to help everybody in that issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency Mr. Mazurek. You have clearly explained the kind of efforts your country has been taking, and you are implementing the water framework law of the EU. In fact, in India, we are struggling to formulate a legislation on the national water framework, because in India, the water is a state subject, and the federal government comes into picture when there is a dispute, whether the regulation of the river, which is flowing across the states. So government is trying how to, even with the current constitutional setup, how it can be done. So this is an important lesson I think we are taking away from this conference. You also mentioned the kind of coordinated efforts, cooperation, national and international, which is very much required. In fact, one of the goals, sub-goals of the SDG 6 is also that the sharing experiences, the coordination among players, countries. So I think it will be useful for all of us. Our next panelist, Dr. A. Ravindra. He is the Chairman, Center for Sustainable Development and Chairman, Institute for Social and Economic Change and former Chief Secretary, Karnataka. Dr. Ravindra.
Thank you. Goal number 6 of SDGs states that ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So here the focus or the emphasis is on sustainable management of water. I would like to relate this to another goal, goal number 12, which says ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Whenever we speak about sustainable development, sustainable consumption, usually the attention is towards energy consumption, limiting energy. We forget about water. I think it is also important to ensure the consumption and production of water is sustainable. Now, I will illustrate this with two examples, two sectors. One is agriculture, a sustainable management of agriculture, and the other is sustainable management of water for urban areas, or we spoke about sustainable urbanization. When we talk about agriculture, enormous quantities of water is used for irrigation. Nearly 80% of the water withdrawals are towards agriculture. But that is one of the most unsustainable uses of water in the field of agriculture and irrigation. I come from the Kaveri state of Karnataka. Maybe recently you would have witnessed the intense conflict and the dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu in terms of sharing Kaveri water. I will not go into the details, except to say that this dispute has cost both the states enormously. One research study has come out with a clear finding saying that, the Kaveri water dispute has caused the modernization of irrigation systems in the Kaveri basin. So my first point is that, the central government, the present secretary is not there, water resources, the former secretary can take note. Although water is a state subject, but at the same time, when it comes to interstate water, the central government has to play a key role. So it is necessary to ensure the water available in a particular river basin, not a particular state. We have to take into account the entire river basin and ensure the efficiency of water systems in that particular basin. A lot of rivers, like we know about Ganga, even Kaveri is highly polluted. We will lose many rivers if we do not pay attention to improving the water quality and saving the river water. That is number one. The second point is about using water in urban areas. We are all speaking about urbanization, urban population increasing and all that. But here again, the consumption of water is so unsustainable. We are extracting groundwater without any kind of regulation. There is hardly any regulation, although there may be some rules and regulations in some states, they are hardly enforced. In every city, there is a big water mafia which are extracting groundwater and selling it to big apartments and industries. So that is one. And secondly, there is a lot of water wastage. Even, the drinking water that is supplied to Delhi cities like Calcutta, Delhi, Bombay, etc. Delhi itself, I think about 50% of the losses are estimated in the water supply. Bangalore is 45%. Huge water losses. And this is where I think the importance of measurement comes in, referred to by Genevieve and others. We don't really know how much water is being wasted, either in agriculture or in drinking and industrial water supply here. So we need to be accurate with our data and take steps to prevent wastage of water. I think that is the second point. And in view of the shortage of time, the last point I would like to make is the question of water governance. Ultimately, management of water resources will depend on the institutions that govern them. I think the chairman referred to institutions. So the water institution, there are so many water institutions, irrigation department, the drinking water supply department, urban development, Ministry of Water Resources. I mean, it is necessary to have a coordinated view, a coordinated system, both to plan and to use water resources, either water supply to urban areas or water supply for irrigation. Unless we take a holistic view of water management, I think the present system will just continue and continue forever. So let me conclude by saying that we need a proper understanding of the various problems relating to water management and climate change, and more than anything else, involve the people, the citizens, in measures like conservation of water, preventing water losses, and using water in an optimum way without wasting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra. I think you have brilliantly pointed out the challenges in the case of the water governance, how it can be done. If you look at internationally, there is only one convention, UN Convention on Non-Navigational Use of Water, 1997, which was just came into force in August 14, 2014. So that is internationally available, and because there in the all over the world there are about 270 transboundary river water which crosses many countries, and there are issues which Dr. Ravindra has talked about, the Kaveri kind of issues. The world is also facing about that. So this governance, while at the international level is very much required, because only 39 countries have ratified that convention. So there is a need for international global water governance setup. Further, also the similar reflection one can see at the national level, at the transboundary level, in many countries where there is a sharing of water is involved. You also mentioned the efficiency part, which is very important because our demand is growing day by day and our supply is finite. We have a finite resources. So given the lifestyle changes, given the economic growth, given the possibility of not polluting the existing resources, we require, unless we are efficient in water use, either in the domestic sector, industrial sector, or in the agricultural sector, we will not be able to meet the demand of our requirement in the near future. So I think you have brought out very vital point for our purpose. Now may I request now Ms. Astrid Schoemaker for giving her thoughts on the subject, and he is currently the Director General Environment, European Commission.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I've been desperately trying to find a point I could disagree with in this panel to make it a bit more exciting for you, but I think that's been impossible so far. Just to say it's a pleasure to be here at the TERI, at the World Summit, in particular because today the EU and India will formalize their cooperation on water, so the signature of an MOU later this afternoon. For those of you who want to know more, there's also a session of the EU-India Water Forum this afternoon as part of the thematic tracks. There's a tall German guy in the audience who might stand up. Perhaps, Guido, if you want to know more about this session, please talk to him. I really only would like to make 5 points in this session, or maybe 6. Starting by the fact that the SDGs are for everybody, and that means action is necessary in the developed world and in the developing world, and obviously in cooperation between the two. I'm speaking very much with one voice, with my Polish colleague, when I describe the situation in the EU. We are often trying to portray ourselves as the guiding light and as the example to follow. I think we have many good practices to share, but we also obviously still have many challenges ahead that we need to tackle. They relate to water quality. We have only 50% of our fresh water, roughly, in good ecological status at this point in time. We are facing problems of chemical pollution. We are looking, obviously, also at new issues that are only coming to the forefront now, pollution with endocrine disruptors, for example, combination effects of chemicals. Not enough known about this yet, but certainly on our radar screen. We are having problems increasingly with drought, set to be exacerbated, obviously, with climate change. But already now, we see 11% of our people and 17% of our territory affected by drought in Europe. And Europe, of course, has challenges of cross-border cooperation. And we have found a way to tackle these challenges, and that's really what I would like to focus on. Specifically, I would like to speak about 5 possible pathways that we have identified in Europe that would enable us, and I think enable us globally, to move towards SDG implementation. And these would be legislation and its implementation, cooperation, a wider perspective, looking at how we can leverage the SDGs by looking at interlinkages between various policy areas, innovation, and finally financing. I can only say very briefly something about any of these, but let me start with legislation. What we think is very important in the European Union and what has worked is setting ambitious targets. So making clear what governments, what water industry stakeholders need to reach, where they have to go. Having a legal framework in place that looks at the river basin and looks at river basin management in a holistic approach. We have requirements to have basin management plans that have to be done every 6 years. And we have a requirement to set out plans of action, how shortages will have to be addressed. This is very important. But legislation is always nice because it's on paper. What really matters is to have implementation of this legislation. And we have set up a very, let's say, complex process of a common implementation strategy where 28 countries sit together, meet regularly, discuss any problem they may be having in implementation, and where we are then jointly developing guidance documents, more than 30 so far, to try and address these issues. Very, very important. Second point is for me cooperation. Obviously within every country with all stakeholders, that goes without saying. In the water context, very, very important international cooperation, cross-border cooperation. Within the EU, we have legislative framework. Internationally, the chair has just referred to it. We have UN conventions, which we very much support. And we also see, of course, very interesting projects to manage individual rivers. In the EU, for example, we have the Rhine Commission. We look at the Danube. There is the Mekong. So there are very, very interesting approaches that we think are replicable and need to be replicated. Third point are really the interlinkages, and that was already said by our colleague from the World Bank. The SDGs are a present to everybody, but we should really not look at water problems only from a water legislation and water policy perspective. This will only get us so far. What we really need to look at is to leverage the SDGs as a whole and look at other policy approaches that will be beneficial for water. From the European Union perspective, first and foremost, resource efficiency, moving towards the circular economy, using less water in the production process, recycling, using less chemicals, etc., etc. This will be beneficial for water quantity shortages and water quantity concerns and water quality concerns. My next point, and almost last point then, is innovation. Very, very important to find a way that innovation is being brought to the market. There's lots of interesting research out there. There are lots of promising enterprises out there with great ideas, and there's the government somewhere else with its legislation, and then there's the water sector in another corner and stakeholders somewhere else. It is important that we bring all of these people together. We have in Europe created something called the European Innovation Partnership for Water, where we try and bring everybody to the table and look at a number of challenges and see what everybody can bring to the table to respond to these individual challenges. We are keen to extend this approach also internationally and also to work with India as part of this partnership. And last but not least, and certainly very, very important also in the Indian context, financing. The financing gap for water is huge, and that's certainly a problem in the developing world, but also in the European Union. And maybe we can find the money in the EU, and we do, to invest in wastewater treatment facilities. We have a lot of them. In fact, we only have a small wastewater treatment problem left within the EU, but the upkeep of these facilities, and how to finance that is a challenge for everybody, and certainly something we would like to discuss also with India, how to do it. And it is really important, we think, from our perspective and our experience, that we find a way that these things almost pay for themselves. And the Polish Vice Minister has referred to that also: water charges, water pricing, economic instruments. These are all tools that need to be brought to the forefront. So these are really my 5 little recipes from the EU context that we think could be interesting internationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher, for elucidating some pathways, at least for our learning purpose and also implementation purpose in the next couple of years. You have mentioned very important thing, the European Innovation Partnership. So this is very important concept. The time has come to adopt a similar kind of concept in countries like India. We do not have this innovation partnership in the water sector. Of course, there is a innovation council and also efforts are going on, but specifically in the water sector, we hardly see any kind of approach on this side. So I think this kind of applicability of this concept in a country like India is very important. You also mentioned the pricing part, for efficient water use of the for various purposes, and this pricing signal is extremely important, because we have seen that lack of harmonization of policies sometimes makes the use unsustainable in the water sector. For example, in some states in India, the water is in the agriculture sector is given free of cost or at a very subsidized price, and the result is that they extract more water from the ground. If you look at the states like Haryana, like Punjab, like Delhi, the abstraction of water is much more than the recharge of water in the ground. So the adverse problem about the quality of water, on the health issues, about conserving the water. So it is a big issue for if you do not signal through the pricing mechanism in the water sector. So I think some points are very much universal kind of application is there, and we hope that to implement in the coming months. Our last but not the least speaker, Dr. Alok Sikka. He is from the International Water Management Institute, country representative, India.
PPT?
Yes, please.
Okay, I can start?
Yeah,
Sure.
okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I represent International Water Management Institute, and first of all, I'm going to make 4 important points. One is the challenge is how to harmonize the synergies and the complementarities between the INDCs and the SDGs. And as we know that as far as the INDCs are concerned, particularly enhancing the efficiency and making more access, wastewater, solar irrigation, and you may be wondering, the last point I have put the forest tree cover, because that's also add to the hydrology in the water. And they are all, there is a SDG 6, plus they are all interlinked other SDGs, where the water cuts across all these sectors. So that is why to bring in more holistic approach by synergizing all these complementarities is a major challenge. As I said, I'll just touch upon few of these priority areas, because I just can't go into all of them because of the paucity of time. And as we know that increasing the water use efficiency, as the earlier speakers have mentioned, and water productivity, means the per unit water, how much you can gain, more crop per drop. Because we have worked out in the EME sometimes back that how much there is a gap between the potential and the existing, and we know the lower water use efficiencies. Now, not only that, it will make you available more water accessible for the other users, but also at the same time, it has potential to reduce the GHG emission, because as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the best water management practices can reduce the global warming potential or the GHG emission by the order of about 25 to 30%, at the same time saving the water. So there is a lot of synergy, and this is something which has to be seen, that how best we can harmonize on that, synergize on that. There are a number of interventions. I'm not going to go into the detail with varying from the on-farm water management and canal-fed irrigation, pressurized irrigation, more coppered up, and then ICT applications, solar irrigation, and the PPT. I think that's the public-private partnership. Another very important thing is energy, source of energy for groundwater. There is a greater dependence on groundwater in this part of, in the South Asia region and more so in India. We need energy. There is excessive use of energy, and how it is linked with the SDG 7 on the renewable energy resources, because this is one of our work which I have done in Gujarat, where we are trying to see that how best the farmer can capitalize on the energy which he saves in pumping the groundwater, and he can encash it by putting it on the grid. And so there is an ample opportunity to look into those kind of things. And on the right-hand side, if you see on the top, in Bihar, where the groundwater is sitting there, but you do not have the energy, so this will work even for the smallholder farmers to have a better access to the groundwater. So there are triple wins in terms of greenhouse reduction, sustainable use of groundwater, as well as enhancing access, as well as the income to the farmers. And as a result, we in IMI have recently come up with a concept. We have got the first solar pump energy cooperative association also in Dhundi. Now, another very important thing is, as I said, because our dependence is more on groundwater, and whenever there are droughts or the floods, droughts especially, we get dependence on, increases more on the groundwater extraction. So the groundwater recharge, as you can see, but it has to be done at a scale. If you put 1 or 2 water harvesting structures or the recharge structures, but if you kind of saturate the watershed, and then you can see on the right-hand side how best in 8 years, the entire groundwater buildup has taken place, and that is a good example of building resilience against the climate change or any other kind of such eventualities. Another piece of work which we have recently started, and I think is going to be uptake into the uptake program, is underground taming of floods for irrigation. We are piloting it in UP, means because there is a twin problem of floods as well as the droughts, as we see, which are on the increase as a result of the climate change. Then how best quickly we can try to have a more enhanced groundwater recharge through these kind of measures. My last submission is on resource recovery and reuse, means the wastewater and also the fecal sludge management. How best we can recycle that, also harness the nutrients from there. Recycling of the nutrients in order to see that how best we can have a lesser load on the inorganic fertilizers, that will also reduce the emission. So I leave you with a few points, as I mentioned, that we need to be looking into and just prioritizing the smart and inclusive interventions, which cut across, which have got more complementarity. Convergence is a major mantra to have a holistic and integrated approach. And as my colleague Jen was mentioning, what we cannot measure, we cannot manage. And the monitoring, target setting, monitoring protocols, methodology. In that, as somebody mentioned about the UN water, IMI is already working with the UN water, and even day before yesterday we have had, and I think in 2017 they are going to roll it out. Strong partnerships, as we have already indicated, and the public finance. As we all know, we have been talking about the major challenges bringing in the interministerial convergence, coordination, and monitoring. Because most of the countries, so is in India, we have national action plans, national missions, how best we can cut across to bring in more synergy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sikka, and for giving us the live examples, the kind of efforts your institution has been partnering with various places, other institutions, and especially your smart solar irrigation, that particularly that is very important. And you also brought out the mapping between INDC target which India has adopted and how one can link with the sustainable development goals, which is extremely important and in the present context. So I think we have practically no time to take the question, because I was one question. Okay, yeah. So I think we can take 2-3 questions and together. Can you? I think when I take the gentleman in the second row.
Hello.
Here. Please give the mic here.
Just speak.
No, I think.
You can speak from there louder. Okay, everyone. Yeah, don't wait the mic.
Yeah, good morning.
Half a minute.
I am HS Yahya from Aligarh University. I have very brief questions, rather two. One is that we have been talking here about the development sustainable, and it is all our Homo sapiens selfish way of looking to only the development of the human being. So the point is here that mechanism of maintaining for this panel, not the earlier one, mechanism of maintaining the water table through the conservation of wetlands. If the wetlands of the world are shrinking in a way they are, from where we will be getting the water? And also that is linked with the groundwater. The water use is so much, but I haven't heard anything about that, how we maintain the groundwater, and also conservation of the rainwater, which is the easiest way to conserve. And in those countries, especially where the rain is plenty. So the conservation of rainwater should be at the priority, which is the cheaper probably than the other mechanisms. And then thereby maintaining the water tables, which is the lifeline for even to the local people at the urban and whatever it is. So these 2 points has to be elaborated. Thank you.
Can I have the next question, please? Yeah,
Good morning. My question is to Dr. Ravindra. So what do you feel is the real reason for the sensitive Kaveri issue to erupt again and again? I mean, what is missing, do you feel? Is it the education at the rural level? Is it become more of a political agenda between the two states? And how, as responsible citizens of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, can we ensure that this issue is resolved in a fair manner?
Can I take the question here? I think.
I have a question, sir.
Oh, yeah, please.
So I am Anudeep. I am a research scholar from IIT Kanpur. So my question is, farmers are an integral part of water conservation and agriculture. So what role does a farmer have at a very root level, a very base level? Because farmers are important in conserving water. So what role does a farmer have? And my second question to Ravindra sir is, so you have mentioned that 80% of water is used in agriculture and there is an unsustainable use of water. So can you please explain how that is an unsustainable use of water? Because as per the statistics, the water requirement for a farmer has been depleting. The water is not reaching the farmer in the previous years, and because of that we are seeing many drought cases, and even there is a shortage of food supply. So can you please explain me on that? Thank you.
So I'll take 2 questions because we have to wind up.
One, because otherwise nobody will have any time to eat any
Yes,
lunch.
please.
Thank you. I am R.K. Khanna, former Chief Engineer, Central Water Commission. Dr. Ravindra has raised very good points on this issue, and the most important is he said the coordinating system is needed in the water sector. Sir, I've been telling in many forums, Ministry of Water Resources is supposed to be the coordinator in water sector at the center, but they are not backed by any laws and acts like the Ministry of Environment. So I have been in ministry, and our role has been only advisory. We advise, people listen to it if it suits them, otherwise they forget about it. Wherein that river disputes, we have not been very effective. So I think national framework law is being framed. What is the status of that? And will it be able to help us in getting some teeth for the ministry?
Okay. The last question from the back, I think. We will take from the back.
Sir, I am Venkatesh. I come from Hyderabad, which is a southern Indian city. We used to have 2,000 lakes in the city, and then, during independence time. And now we are left with 160 lakes. Now, even historically, we have read Ashoka used to dig a lot of lakes and then planted trees. And then there's a king by name, Sri Krishna Devaraya in South India again. Now he has dug a lot of lakes, and then we saw a golden period during his time where precious stones were sold on the road. Now, is there any goal where we talk about digging lakes and wells etc., which is very important to, conserve water as well as prevent floods. I mean, which is a very big problem we have seen in California as well as Chennai, and then recently we had this problem in Hyderabad too.
Thank you. So I think we can answer. Can you request?
Questions seem to be directed at me. Number one, Kaveri, it's a very complicated issue. It will be difficult to explain within a short period of time, except to say, see, there is a tribunal award which is apportioned water, certain quantity to Tamil Nadu and certain quantity to Karnataka. The real problem arises during periods of drought when there is failure of rains, because the water has to flow from reservoirs in Karnataka to Tamil Nadu. So where there is shortage of water and it doesn't go, a dispute arises. That is one part. There are legal issues and all that. But I'll come to the more important issue about, which is raised by others also, about the role of the farmers. You see, the main problem arises because most of the crops cultivated in the Kaveri basin are paddy and sugarcane. So paddy and sugarcane are water guzzlers. They consume enormous quantities of water. So it has been suggested time and again that they should replace at least part of that by light crops, which don't require much water. And there's a lot of violation of the cropping pattern. Even where light crops are expected to be grown, they grow, this paddy and sugarcane. So recently, or sometime back during the last crisis, there was what is called a Kaveri water family. That is, the non-governmental people, farmers on either side, certain experts and all came together in order to find common solutions. And that is the right way, where the consumers, the farmers and experts, they are involved. So this is the trend, and recently another meeting was held about this Kaveri water family, and we are taking it forward to see how we can find solutions. But government also has to play its role. The other thing about lakes, like Hyderabad, Bangalore, from where I come, is also a city of lakes. But it is true that lakes have been disappearing gradually. From thousands, it has come down to hundreds. It may go down further. But there is a move towards restoration of lakes. In Bangalore, we have taken up restoration of lakes on a large scale, but it means a lot of investment of money. At the same time, it's not very easy, because the water in the lakes have got polluted so often, and urban users have just made lakes disappear. The real problem relates to sewage. See, a lot of sewage water in urban areas enter the lakes and pollute them. So unless you prevent entry of sewage into lakes, it is going to be a huge problem. So, but there are solutions. I'm not saying there are no solutions. As I said, there is want of time. The only last point I would like to make is the question of financing, because we say we need money for everything. But capital investment is one, where even international agencies like World Bank, ADB and all, they do come in for large water projects. Bangalore has Kaveri water project, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. But the other thing is, the recovery of water cost. See, the cost of producing and delivering water is increasing by the day, but we are not able to recover even the maintenance costs in urban areas. Water charges are abysmally low. If there is one thing very cheap in India, it is water, drinking water. We just don't realize, both drinking water and irrigation water. And it's very little we pay. So unless the economics of water supply is also considered, I think it will be very difficult to find a long-term or a lasting solution.
Astrid, do you want to?
If I could request everyone just to keep their comments brief. Thank you.
Okay. So I think in any discourse of water, there are many issues which, agitates the mind of the various, because water is a subject which is very close to heart and is very emotive kind of issue actually. So whatever problem we are seeing in India and in the other countries is because of that. So we have to work together. We have to take action on many fronts, and the panelist has given suggestions, and hopefully the takeaway from the conference would be those which are useful and those who can be implemented in many countries, including India. So thank you very much for your kind suggestions and valuable guidance.
Thank you very much. And before we go, we've got a very relevant little announcement, because TERI is very glad to launch a policy brief on the subject of sustainable urban water development and the necessity of integrating water, energy, and food dimensions into development policies. So I'd like to request Dr. Sarkar to kindly release the policy brief in the presence of the panel, please.
Can we write? Maybe some photo will be taken. In fact, this is the first time that TERI has come out on this policy brief. It basically is talking about energy, food, and water nexus. When we talk about this subject, we talk in the context of the rural segment. But here they are talking about the context, the urban segment, how these three interrelated aspects should be looked in an integrated manner. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You'll find copies of that briefing outside the hall for you. It's now time for lunch. If you can please be back here at 1:15, we'll crack on with the afternoon sessions. Thank you so much.